Good evening, welcome back to the Celtic Way. I am your host, John McGinley. I am joined by Ryan McGinley at Hampden, who was there for the Scottish Cup final between Celtic and Aberdeen. That's not what we wanted, that's not how we wanted it to pan out at all. But we've got a lot to talk about. First, a quick note from our sponsor, Seneca Medical Group. They're our new sponsors until the end of the 2025-26 season, and we thank them for their support. It's a big help to the channel and the website. You can check out their services in the tags below and on the banner. And yeah, we've tagged them on our socials and in the description box below. So give them a look. They've got clinics in Glasgow, Edinburgh, and Aberdeen. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, then go for that. Ryan, how are you doing, mate? A long emotional day at Hampden, was it?
It was a tiring one. It was very much you're going through the ringer a little bit watching that game. It's devastating to lose the way that they lost today on penalty shootouts. Wasn't the greatest game to watch as a spectator watching on. Celtic probably just didn't do enough on the day to win the game, and that's the crux of the matter, I would say. A couple of okay performances here and there, but for the most part, it was one of those games that maybe a game too far at the end of the season for a long season for Celtic. You know, we've been covering Celtic since, trying to even think about the first pre-season games from then on. Not really to have a winter break or anything from then till now. It's been a long season, and they fell short of the treble this afternoon, unfortunately.
Listen, this is there's emotions run high in moments like this. People are very upset. They're either very angry. They have lots of opinions. There's lots of stuff flying about. I'm going to try and take the role as kind of to guide everyone through this evening. So if you're very upset, you're very annoyed, or you're feeling the extremes of emotions, yourself included, Ryan, then maybe we can just try and process it all together a little bit. I'm going to see that as my role this evening. Look, the thing is, Celtic don't experience days like this often, don't they? Do they? It just doesn't happen. I mean, the fact that was Aberdeen's first Scottish Cup win in 35 years tells its own story about the kind of dominance that Celtic have enjoyed in this country over that time frame. And these days will come along now and again, especially when the match goes to penalties. Celtic have had actually joy in penalty shootouts in recent years. It was in their post, shall I say. And I think the performance levels weren't good enough, and I think that's acknowledged. Celtic were too slow. Brendan Rodgers noted that in his post-match press conference. Not enough creativity in the team. I think especially without Jota and Ray Otati, there's undoubted squad depth issues around the team. I think, the fact that we were having to move about players, having to bring a young player like Johnny Kenny on in such an important moment. Again, no harm to Johnny Kenny at all. But when you think about, selling Kyogo in January, for example, etc., there's just a whole load of issues around there, even before you get into today's match. So it is a sore one. There is lots of talking points to get into. Where do you want to start, Ryan? Are you, you've just spoken to the players, so why don't we start there and try and get a sense of how the Celtic camp were? They were obviously upset and disappointed, but what was the kind of messaging you were getting from the players that you spoke to?
Yeah, well, first of all, only 2 players came out to speak to the media. I think that tells you everything that you need to know about how they're feeling. You had Cameron Carter-Vickers speaking as well. He spoke to the newspapers, but it was Liam Scales and Callum McGregor that were speaking. Very downbeat after the game, as you would expect. It's amazing to think that this is Callum McGregor's first final in his career that he's lost. This is uncharted territories for a player like Callum McGregor to experience. He said after the game it's the worst he's ever felt in football. I think that goes to show you just how much today's game meant to him. He obviously set the tone with the missing of the first penalty. I think from then on it was an uphill task for Celtic. They never could bring back into... Well, they couldn't, because the penalty shootout it turns into a lottery, and obviously that's what happened. But yeah, I was talking to Callum McGregor after the game, and I was saying, can this be a result that maybe perhaps as a positive in the long run? I know it's not a positive just now, but maybe in the long run it can galvanise them. And he agreed with that. He said that they can use that energy just now as a bit of a positive going into the new season, into the qualifiers next season. But right now, everybody's going to be talking about how disappointed they are with how the game's unfolded and the way that the final was lost. The fact that Celtic were largely in control up until the final stages of the game. Not scoring that second goal, of course, not killing the game off. Aberdeen were still very much in the tie, but Celtic had the lion's share of possession. A freak goal happens, equaliser, and then from then on, it was a bit of a struggle from then until the penalty shootout. No no second breakthrough, and then, as I said before, as I will continue to say, it becomes a lottery in penalty shootouts, and Aberdeen's penalties were better than Celtic's on the day.
Listen, before we get into too much criticism about the performance today, and guys, that's come in, we're not shying away from that. I do want to say a couple of things about Callum McGregor in particular. Now, he was visibly distraught after the game, and from what I've seen in the video you sent over, which we'll have up on the channel later, he was still upset when he was speaking to the media.
Very much so.
To some degree. And I don't mind that at all. I think I think it's okay to show emotion in these situations. That's natural human feeling, and I don't think anyone should ever shy away from that, whether they're in public or not. That's just how I live my life. What I would also say is that Callum McGregor's never lost one of these finals in his entire career. He's 31 and he's done so much good stuff for Celtic. He's won so much with Celtic at youth level, at senior level, as a captain. It's remarkable. And I actually think it's a strength of his character that in a moment, considering everything that he's won with Celtic, he could be complacent. This could mean less to him than other players in that squad. That would be a natural feeling. And I think it's a credit to him as a Celtic player, as a Celtic leader, that he is so upset about today. I think that shows how much he cares about this, how much he cares about his profession, how much he cares about his teammates and his manager, and how much he cares about Celtic. So I actually see the fact that Callum McGregor, he won't feel like this now, obviously, but I feel the fact that Callum McGregor was so upset in that moment says a lot about the kind of captain, the kind of guy he is, and he's exactly the kind of guy that I want to be playing for Celtic. So, I know it's because he missed the penalty. I understand that it's just a very extreme feeling and a very extreme situation, but good luck to Callum McGregor. I've got no ill feeling towards him at all.
He's got plenty of credit in the bank, I would say. Look at all the trophies that he's won throughout his career. He missed a penalty. Anybody can miss a penalty in a penalty shootout. It's him versus the goalkeeper, 1-on-1, and he missed it. It wasn't his greatest performance today, but I seen a guy out there that was trying to win the trophy for his team today. I seen him running 20, 30, 40 yards to make a tackle and nearly injuring himself in the process in the first half. That's just a measure of the player and a measure of the man. You can be a captain, and I think you show your true colours in both victory and defeat. He's a good winner, but he's also a good loser as well. It feels wrong even saying that, but he lost today. He was on the losing side, but to show that emotion, I think that's a picture that will stay with me for quite a bit, to be honest. And even speaking to him after the game, seeing him so downbeat, he's a guy that you expect to be sort of positive after a game, because he wins these finals. So the fact that he hasn't was a bit rare, a bit new. But I think the fact that it takes guts as well to front up to the media. You've missed a penalty and still go out and speak to the media, speak to the press, and really convey what you're trying to say. And he did that. So I'm not. He's got far too much credit in the bank for me to sit and criticise him, to be honest.
Another difficult moment for Kasper Schmeichel today, who has been fantastic throughout the season. His own goal in the 83rd minute leads to Aberdeen. Well, results in Aberdeen's equaliser just when Celtic looked like they were heading for a 1-0 victory, thanks to an own goal from Aberdeen. It was a strange game. There was no shots on target in the first half, but Celtic went into the interval 1-0 up. The Celtic didn't really push on from that point. That should have been a platform for them to go and kill off the game, and it just didn't quite happen. Brendan Rodgers said yourself, you've seen his press conference later, or you'll read it, it's up on the site right now, but he essentially alluded to the fact that Celtic were slow and ponderous today and didn't have a cutting edge against an Aberdeen team who liked to sit low. And I think we expected that could have been part of their game plan today. They've had moments against Celtic this season where they've been too open and they've been punished for that. But they were playing for some sort of ground out draw or penalty win, I felt, from the off today, which is their prerogative. That's how they felt gave them the best chance to win a cup final, and as was said, and as Brendan Rodgers said, fair play to them. They've won their first Scottish Cup in 35 years. That is an achievement in itself. So while they played with tactics that did frustrate Celtic as players and did frustrate Celtic supporters, ultimately Celtic as a collective just didn't show enough, regardless of the individual moments in terms of Kasper Schmeichel, Callum McGregor and Alistair Johnston. It was a collective failing today, I felt.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to put shoulder the blame on anything or blame any one single person, because it was turgid today at the National Stadium, which in some ways is understandable and in some ways is a bit questionable, because it's a cup final. You want to really race over the line and get that treble, and then really go into the summer with that optimism. Where there's still optimism, but not as much as maybe what there could have been if there was a treble. It's a double. It's a mildly successful season. They got the job done in the league, but it's not the treble that everybody wanted, and it's going to sting for a few days. But I just think everybody, it was just a slow game, and that suited Aberdeen. The fact that Celtic weren't at their best, in some parts was down to the way that Aberdeen were playing. They were rigid. They kept a low block. They weren't trying to counter attack all too often, and it suited them. I just think Celtic really missed the creativity, as you spoke about at the start of the podcast. I thought they missed Jota, and especially Rio Hatate. He's the risk maker. He's the risk taker in the middle of the park. He's the guy that can unlock defences with those splitting passes. And he was missing today, unfortunately. And they don't have a player like him that can really be that creative spark in the middle. Yes, the players like Bernardo and McGregor and Engels can show good moments. I think in terms of creativity, they'll have to go a long way before they're surpassing Rio Hatate's creativity on the pitch. So I thought he was a big miss, but we knew he was going to be out of the game. That's the thing. We all knew. It was up to Celtic to find a sort of workaround, and they didn't today. And as much as I'm disappointed with the result, I just don't think they played well enough to get the victory in the end.
And while Brendan Rodgers was critical of some aspects of the performance, of course, he also did say as well that he wasn't angry with the team in the dressing room, and his message to the dressing room was that they've still achieved a lot this season. They've been consistent for parts of the season, and they obviously had a decent run in Europe, and I think he knows that they'll be upset, and these times he said that they should spend time with their families because they'll need them, and take a couple of weeks to reflect on everything and come back more motivated in the summer. So he's not throwing anyone under the bus either. He understands that perhaps he got some things wrong today too. And it's a day that sometimes you've got to experience as a football fan. I kind of said this to Martin O'Neill in the interview that's up on elsewhere on the YouTube channel the other day. I grew up, watching the Tommy Burns team, and they taught me when I was a young kid that yes, there's lots of joy in seeing Celtic play well, but you also experience the bitterness of defeat sometimes as well, and you've got to accept that that's what this sport is. Celtic will never be perfect every moment of the day. We all want Celtic to live up to their potential, and their potential really, truly is the fact that they can win a treble and win it more years often than not. This year it didn't quite happen, and it was just the disappointment for me today was it was the kind of it was slow and laboured today in a way that we've seen at times this season, but a lot of the time Celtic have managed to get themselves up for these big games, and it was just a little bit missing today, and that's the frustration for me. But the players will be feeling that as well.
Yeah, they absolutely will be. It was slow. I did think though, when there's a couple of nervy moments towards the end of the normal time and going into extra time. There was a couple of corners for Aberdeen. I was like, if Celtic can defend these, if you take it to extra time, the fitness levels will kick in and Celtic will have the better of their opponents. But they just didn't seem to have that oomph in extra time either. I thought they would get it done. Instead, yes, there was a couple of chances here and there. I can't remember exactly when Jeffrey Schlupp hit the bar. The game was a bit of a blur, and was it the second half of extra time that he hit the bar? Yeah, but that was just a good effort, a goal that hit the bar. But once it goes to penalties, as I said, it's anyone's game. And credit to Aberdeen, their penalties were really, really good. In particular, Ode Daba's penalty was that was one of the best penalties I've seen, right into the roof of the net. Kasper Schmeichel has no chance. It was disappointing for him as well, because he's had such a good season and he didn't have a chance to atone for that error that he made for the Sheedon Morris cross that went into the back of the net. The fact that he couldn't get anywhere near the majority of any of the penalties was quite disappointing. And maybe that'll be something, a sort of narrative that comes out of the game. Should it have been Sinisalo that was in goals? But anyone can make a mistake in any given game, and it's just them's the breaks basically. That's them's the breaks in football.
What I think will be a persistent issue coming out of today will be what I said at the top of the show in terms of squad depth and strengthening this summer. I think that's a valid reaction to what was witnessed today. there might be some of that goes over the top in the coming hours and days. That is the nature of supporting a football club, especially with some of the online reaction. But I think it's a valid point that Celtic's squad depth probably isn't where it needs to be given the resources that Celtic have, and that Brendan Rodgers deserves to be backed, and his squad deserves to be strengthened to the extent that he wants to strengthen. And the onus is on the recruitment staff at Celtic and the negotiating team at Celtic to deliver that, really. We'll find out potentially this weekend if we'll be seeded or not for this Champions League playoff. That now becomes the sole focus of Brendan Rodgers and his team, is to qualify for next season's Champions League. That is the next biggest match on the horizon. And it might seem a bit absurd that we're already talking about that minutes after a Scottish Cup final in which we've been defeated to Aberdeen, but that's the work that's ahead for Brendan Rodgers, for the players, for the staff, to go away, come back and attack Scottish football again next year, but most importantly fulfil their potential on the European stage. And for me, that involves qualifying for the league phase and competing at that level. So it's a sore one today, Ryan. I'm noticing a lot of people, there's a lot of comments coming through in the chat today. There's actually so much that I'm not able to kind of read them in real time and add them to the screen, but I'm sensing that people are both kind of upset with how today panned out, and also, you know, a few pragmatic comments in terms of the big picture stuff. It's a mixture of feelings. You do get extremes on both sides of everything. I think, as I say, how it will all spell out in the coming days and weeks will be around this squad depth issue. I think that's probably the lasting lesson of this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I take it upon myself as well after games to sort of stay off social media as much as I can, because it can be quite a reactionary place. I know that so clearly. You know, we all went through the 2020-21 season when that was the only way for people to vent their anger, because they couldn't actually be at the games. But you see a wee that anger that still remains sometimes that comes out after adverse results. But it's all about staying balanced and measured. I know that can be difficult. You bring the emotions into it, but it's all about being balanced.
Listen, I understand anger too. Like, I totally get it. I understand looking at that game today and being upset and angry about it. I've got no problem with people feeling like that at all. That is a justified reaction to the day as well. I'm just, it's not my kind of vibe. I'm a kind of big picture type of guy, and I know there was definite frustrations today. I'm just thinking about Celtic getting back on the horse, really, and thinking about Celtic improving again from here. Anything else that kind of sticks out from today is kind of, what about Arnie Engels? A lot of people talking about him getting, you know, substituted and his performance. You know, Adamida, should he have come off as early as he did as well? What was your thoughts on Brendan Rodgers' substitutions today?
I was okay with them at the time. Obviously, I think I wanted to see changes so that Celtic could go and get the second goal, bring on that second sort of unit coming onto the pitch, bringing some fresh legs. It's only when you look back on the game, you look how the game transpired, you'll probably be like, oh, he made the wrong sub. At the time, I wasn't complaining about those subs coming onto the pitch. Maybe the only one looking back on it, you know, right before he was taken off the pitch, Arnie Engels hit the post with a quite a nice shot. Maybe he was growing into the game as the game was going on. Maybe his race was run and he had to come off the pitch. Maybe he needs to last. I mean, there's that question: can he last 90 minutes in games at the moment? Maybe that can be his focus in the off season coming into the season. That he can maybe take a leaf out of Rio Tati's book and last for 90 minutes rather than the 60, 70 minutes. Because it's happening a lot now that he's coming off in games when you're thinking, you know, you're £11 million man. You want him to come. You want him to really be the difference in games like this for Adamida as well. I thought he was actually growing into the game as the game wore on. He looked as if he'd had some, or Brendan Rodgers had given him some strong words at half time on what he had to do and what he had to improve. And I actually felt like he was coming into the game a little bit more. Then all of a sudden he was taken off the park. So when you reflect on things and you look back in the game, and you can tie yourself in knots with these subs. This is what managers are paid handsomely for, to make these split-second decisions. And they can go for you and against you. And unfortunately for Brendan Rodgers, it went against them. But one thing I would agree with you in saying is that the squad depth needs to improve in the team. I think that's a unanimous verdict. There needs to be players that can come off the bench that can win games and be trusted to win games game in, game out for Celtic. The side was looking a bit threadbare towards the end. It was good to see Jeff Slope coming on, probably his farewell game, hit the bar, but probably looking for a little bit better next season in order to attack every competition that Celtic will be in, whether that's Champions League, Europa League, etc., and then all the domestic games as well. They'll be fighting on 4 fronts regardless next season, and they've got to have the players that are equipped to do that from August to May, June time.
I think there'll be a fair bit of turnover. I wouldn't be surprised if there's more than Jeffrey Schlupp saying goodbye to Celtic after the end of that.
Just and Greg Taylor as well.
And not as a reaction to what we witnessed today. I just feel like there's evolution in the squad coming. And I think there's going to be a decent bit of refreshment. I guess that's probably what people are looking for ultimately. And those are conversations for another time. I know we've been speaking for about 20 minutes here. We're not going to go on too much longer, folks. We just wanted to turn up and say, we do come on when it's a defeat as well. We don't just turn up when Celtic are winning. And we will think critically about the direction Celtic are going and the reaction to today. We've got all of that coming up next week with our morning shows, etc. We've also got plenty of reaction on our website and on the channel later on as well. Brendan Rodgers' press conference is already up at celticway.co.uk. We'll have the video version of that on the YouTube channel as soon as I'm able to turn that around. And we also have some chat with Callum McGregor as well, as Ryan said there. And another that I think is getting held back till tomorrow. Is that Ryan?
Liam Scales, is getting held back till tomorrow.
Okay. Well, we'll have it all on the Celtic Way, so keep it tuned here. I really appreciate everyone's comments today. I wish I could have brought it, but it was just moving too fast, and considering I'm hosting, it's just grabbing the ones that I want to put in can be a bit hectic. But if you want to leave a comment on anything that you witnessed today, just leave it down below and we'll have a look at it. And as I say, we'll be back on Monday with lots more chat around Celtic, around the direction of Celtic, the reaction today, what specifically went wrong today, and perhaps a little bit of positivity too, because as we say, Celtic season in entirety has been fairly successful both domestically and in Europe, and I think it would be remiss to forget that in this moment, which is a difficult moment. And this is the last match reaction of the season, Ryan. It's been a long old season. There'll be plenty more on the channel, but no more live from stadiums for a wee while.
No, I know it has been a long season. I was actually trying to think of the first sort of live reaction I did this season. Thinking back, probably Kilmarnock. We had some pre-season games as well, but Kilmarnock on Flag Day. So from then until now, there's been loads to discuss about Celtic. It's been a pleasure having you on board as well, John. Not that you're going anywhere, but it's been good to add you to the team. But yeah, well, that's the end of this season, and now all focus is on the new one and some new players to go with that as well.
Yep, listen, we've got player ratings as well. We've got Tony's analysis from Hampden if you want to go and read that on celticway.co.uk. Tony is about as well. Thanks everyone. We'll be back on Monday. And as I say, look out for lots more videos coming up on the channel over the next 24 hours or so. Goodbye.